Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to this week's Pilot Group podcast. It's Not Just Hot Air. Aptly named, we think. A great title for what you guys do. Our last session was with Lee and Phoebe, and it's got some really big attention, which was a great way to kick off, which is going to be a regular series of podcasts that are going to talk about the environmental issues facing larger manufacturing and warehousing businesses when it comes to more sort of sustainable methods of working and reducing consumption of gas in the workplace. My name's Graham, and I'm going to be your host just for today. And with me for this session and this morning, I have Phoebe Baker back with me, who is a senior account manager here at the Pilot Group. And we've also got Odessa Walsh, who's a account manager here as well. So I think you're going to do a far better job at introducing yourself here this morning. So I'm going to avoid you arguing who's going to go first. Odessa, let's start with you first. Why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell people just a little bit about yourself?
Okay, hello, I'm Odessa. I'm an account manager at the Pilot Group. So I'm out on site with clients, doing the survey, working out how we can help them, just being there start to finish.
And I'm Phoebe. I'm one of the account managers too. I'm not going to go into the same spiel that I did last week. But some interesting fact, I have 2 miniature dachshunds that are called Ethel and Raymond.
Fantastic. And are they famous? Have you made them famous?
No, I have not. It's a shame.
What's the nicest thing about having 2 dachshunds?
I'd probably say the cuddles.
Oh, right, okay. I'll put you on the spot with that, with that question.
It's not the excessive barking.
So today's session is entitled What to Consider if you're trying to phase out gas for renewable energy in industrial spaces. So from the conversations I've had throughout your business, it seems that gas is here to stay. And it seems that obviously in this space when people are talking about electric heating and alternative forms of heating as well within the industrial workspace, why is that? Why is gas such a strong consideration? Why is it going to be kicking around? Why is it so important?
I think it boils down to the infrastructure and also the infrastructure within buildings that businesses are occupying. In a perfect world, if a business moves into a brand new build where the insulation's right, the roof's brilliant, they've got the building fabric and the building makeup to be able to put some form of other heating source in there that is not gas, then win-win. But, most of our clients have been in buildings that are going back to sort of 1940s, 1950s, where it is almost like a tin can in some respects, where the roof has got holes in it and insulation's not that great. So that's where it's a lot harder to consider alternatives, and probably why gas is here to stay for a little bit longer. And do you agree?
Yeah. I was at a site yesterday that was in a building that's like 100 years old, and they had looked at solar panels, and they would have to replace the roof even to just start considering solar panels. So you're absolutely right. It's the age of the buildings. It's in everything that's happened over previous years in terms of costs increasing in parts, materials, living in general. The budget for those kinds of upgrades have got smaller. So people default back to using the gas system they currently have. They're not ready to, or they don't have that budget to be making the big renewable energy jump, because it's not just taking the gas out and putting something electric in or something renewable in. It's, okay, if we want solar panels, we've got to change the roof, we've got to add insulation, we've got to make this worthwhile. And it's just not in everyone's budget to be doing that right now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you make around insulation, because as you were both talking there, I'm thinking, actually, what are these businesses doing in relation to sort of that part of their business? So making sure that they can be the best they can in relation to wall insulation, ceiling insulation, windows and things like that. Are you seeing as much importance in relation to the businesses that you're seeing? Are they paying as much attention onto that as well?
In terms of insulation?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, slightly concerning when you say that.
Yeah, massively so. I think as well, those points very much missed when they are wanting to consider electrified solutions or another renewable source of heating. they just sort of jump to that scheme and what that would particularly look like, and not necessarily considering, exactly like Odessa mentioned in regards to putting solar on your roof. They've literally thought, right, I need solar, this is what we need to look at, and not actually looked at all the other complex stuff that sits around that, like potentially replacing a roof, and that almost comes second. That sometimes is the real blockers as why these schemes don't kick off, I would say.
I mean, you go to some sites and there's holes in the tin shed walls, or there's windows that look, I mean, definitely older than us combined.
Just falling out.
Yeah, and you think, on a building security level, these aren't up to scratch. They're definitely not holding in the heat. So there's so much more to be done to just the building shell before you can get to the renewable energy side.
Because it's become really trendy, isn't it? Solar and how they market. Obviously, we see a lot of this now in our own homes, about having battery walls and things like that, charging our cars, charging our homes and things like that. Do you do any, or are there any comparisons that you make as a business when you go in and see people in relation to surveys? Are there any typical trends that you talk to people about, or are people sort of just saying they're just investigating to see what's out there? What do you see? What are people asking for?
I mean, because our process is quite open in the respect of the questions that we'll ask when we go to site. A lot of it is around, what are you doing currently to reduce your energy consumption, or how are you currently achieving your net zero targets? So they will start to talk about little bits. And I would say most clients are really sort of drilling in on the quick wins, but a lot of it is as well, I think we touched on it earlier actually, in the respect of, it's no one's job in smaller businesses or medium businesses around having an expert around sustainability or building that journey for net zero or reducing energy as a whole. So what they see is just quick wins, LED lighting, let's go for that, solar, let's go for that, and it's very much cherry picking off a shelf of sweets of what they want to do. Whether that's the right way of doing it, probably not, but they don't know any different in some respects, because I feel stupid saying this, but sustainability, especially over these probably last 4 years, has really started to become its own job title. If you go back 10 years ago, probably looking for a job on Indeed or something as a sustainability manager probably wouldn't have been there.
Found it,
no, and I think it's only fairly recently that it started to become a proper university course in some respects as well. So a lot of the knowledge sits with the younger generation that, should I say that? But, it is no one's job. So like I say, I think it boils down to sort of just cherry picking, and actually they're driving a car with a blindfold on in some respects.
And do you think that sort of quick wins, that sort of amplification, I mean, you look at the price, for instance, of gas is staying where it is right now, isn't it? Do you think people are going, oh my God, we thought it was going to come down, we think we're going to make some savings just by naturally it was coming down, but now it's not? Do you think those quick wins have become even more demanding to businesses where they want to bring those cost efficiencies in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the awareness around reducing has increased because of the increase of costs. And those quick wins are becoming even quicker.
Sure.
3-4 years ago, our sort of typical payback period for the controls was around 2 years. We're seeing controls pay for themselves within inside of 12 months now.
Great.
So the quicker wins are becoming quicker, especially even sort of what you would class as a long-term win with solar is becoming a quicker win. But it's almost like you've got to be on a higher rate to be able to benefit off that quick win in some respects.
Yeah, I think it impacts the most to those people who had somebody who secured them a really good tariff a couple of years ago, 2019, 2020 tariff, but their 3 to 5 year tariff is now coming up for renewal, and they see that jump, or the average tariff in the market currently, it's the ones that take their tariff from the 2p to the 10p, and that jump is huge when you start looking at all the gas across the site. That's where these quick wins become quicker, because if you put those numbers against your new tariff, all of a sudden those are very big numbers all of a sudden.
So in the consideration of holding the customer's hand as such, so you've implemented your system, are you staying really close to these people month on month? So if we take the cost of the control system actually out of this, they've made this big decision, they've made this jump, are you then able to demonstrate and sort of work through, or from the figures that they can share with you, you're able to put that into a structured sort of savings process, and so you can report back, or mutually you can understand how much money's been saved at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, the standard as part of our process, specifically more so, we do this regardless of whether we offer a guarantee of savings anyway, but as part of our process, we'll have certain touch points within the first 12 months of that installation.
Right.
3 months, we will be in touch to sort of get the bills, the consumption data, to work out what that analysis has been in terms of the level of savings that we can make. We'll do that on a 6-month basis as well, and then 9 months, 12 months, then we'll do the full analysis within that 12-month period. And for whatever reason, if we're not happy with the level of savings that we've promised to make within either the 3 or 6 month mark, then we can actually review the configuration side of things and go back and feedback and make sure we can make recommendations to get back on track. Or even when we are on track to make those savings, to how can we maximise the savings that we're already making in some respects. So that's sort of our standard process after the 12 months. But we also have the account reviews now as well. So we are having that 12-month touch point even after the 12 months of the installation to be like, well, what can we do next? And we've really honed in on that, I think.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good story, and it's nice to sort of continue that journey with the customers, I'm sure, at the same time. So I'm going to change tack just a little bit with you now. So as you drive up and down and around the motorway networks in the United Kingdom, we're all seeing these big sheds being built on industrial units close to the motorways. Obviously, we understand why. So in the consideration of how those units are being heated, how much involvement are businesses like yours, for instance, getting involved in understanding what the installations are for heating requirements, and how much attention to detail is being paid to this? I'm sure from an architectural perspective, and I think we touched on this, Phoebe, on the first podcast, it's been thought about quite well. But in your experience, what are you both seeing? Are you seeing such consideration in these new builds?
It's a difficult one. I would say probably 90% of our site visits are already sort of existing buildings that are very archaic. It's not a space that we're really in regards to the new build property development side of things. We want to be, but I think the go-to, especially when you're dealing with sort of mechanical engineers and consultants and things like that, they will specify a full building management system, not from an energy saving perspective, but from an operational perspective of just making sure that that equipment's working and is all centralised to one place. So from that building management perspective of actually specifying that, are they looking at the energy side of things? Probably not.
Interesting, isn't it? I think you sort of touched on it on our last podcast. And you would have thought to meet certain regulations. Now, we spoke just a moment ago, didn't we, about insulation. I mean, obviously those units will have to meet a certain standard in relation to insulation. But it staggers me that maybe, what are the rules around installation of heat sources or heat types?
I think the biggest issue on all of the newer builds that we see happening, whether that's commercial or domestic, is unfortunately, as a process, we are very much a design to build country rather than a design to maintain. So we tick the boxes to have something up and it's standard. So whether you move into a new build house or a new build commercial warehouse, it's ticked the box in terms of, okay, it has heat or it has the insulation that we need now to this standard. But actually there's nothing in there to be able to control that. And that's why, and that's legacy. So that's why when we go to sites, a site that we have just been to, I could have counted the amount of thermostats that do nothing because they're just, oh, we need a thermostat box ticked. And they're not linked to anything. They're not doing anything because it was to tick a box rather than to manage the building going forward. And I think that's new builds, including commercial warehouses as well. Just tick the box, but you can't actually do anything successful with the heating or the control of.
And I guess it sort of comes down to what those units are being used for as well. So how much is the door going to be up, how much is going to be down, the types of shift patterns and things like that. But certainly, an opportunity for those architects, for those people to actually bring that in as part of the design and build.
Yeah, I think for an architect's perspective, there's certain guidelines that they'll have to follow with making sure that when a tenant or a client who's bought that premises, it meets a certain EPC rating. But half the time, specifically with new builds, they don't know what type of client or business that's actually going into that property. They're just building it, making sure, like Odessa said, it's ticking the boxes in terms of its EPC rating. It's some form of energy efficient building in regards to insulation, solar, or whatever sort of source of heat that's going in there. But in terms of actually understanding what kind of business that's going to be in there from an operational perspective and how they're going to use that equipment once it's in, there's a bit of a gap there that's not being met, I don't think, in terms of, because you can put all singing, all dancing kind of equipment that goes into a building, but if it's not well controlled, then it's, what's the point?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's almost like creating a series of scenarios. How are you going to use this building, A, B, C, or D? And this is typically what your considerations must be about. So one of the things that we've been talking about off air as such is some of your challenges in actually getting enough time with the right people in organisations. So obviously it's a big issue. People want to save money. FDs are always trying to drive down costs and bring efficiencies into businesses. But why do you think it's becoming, I don't know, would you say increasingly more difficult to get in front of people? Or is the challenge to talk about this subject, is it more around just people giving you their time? What do you think, what are you seeing in the marketplace when you're trying to talk to people about what you guys do?
I think one of the main reasons links back to what we were just discussing a minute ago about the role or responsibility of sustainability. So your first step is who is looking after this, who's responsible for it, and that kind of always falls into a difficult category. Is it the facilities manager? Is it health, safety and environment officer? There's a lot of people there's a lot of people working in the business, but there's not many people who are specifically for sustainability. In some companies there are. So I think the first step is knowing who's responsible for this, who has invested interest, and therefore who is ready to have that conversation. I think that's the first hurdle. Do you agree?
Yeah. I think as well the market is very much changing. I mean, how many solar companies do you see across the UK now that are all selling or proposing the same kind of solution? And how do you separate them out from an FD's perspective in terms of who you're going to pick the phone up to? What's enticing you to not go to that company when pretty much they're offering a very, very similar solution? And I think it's almost frustrating from our perspective because we do have something that's very unique to offer to the industry. And, we're not LED lighting, we're not solar. It is a very, very unique solution that you almost get branded in terms of almost like that category of we can save you money. Sure. And when we go in with that bold statement of that 43 or even the guaranteed 25, you're almost lumped straight back into that category. But once you're actually sat down with a decision maker or whoever who is operating in regards to what you want to talk to them about, you can start breaking down the technology. That's when you can start to see that mindset tick of actually saying, oh, okay, maybe they do mean what they say.
Yeah, sure. It's quite an intellectual proposition, isn't it? Which I'm sure you sort of understand I know you understand to the nth degree, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. But there are so many areas, aren't there? So many points of consideration. Well, I've spoken about it before when we talk about that marginal gain across so many different elements. And do you think people, because it hasn't got that big sort of sexy, buy solar, have solar on your roof and it's the best thing ever because everyone was talking about it type thing, is it because it is so in its various degrees of how you bring that improvement to what you do? It's like a 2% improvement here, a 10% improvement here, a 20% improvement there. Do you find sometimes that gets in the way as well? It's not a big sort of, I buy this and I get that, but I've got to understand all this. Do people find it complicated?
I think so. I think people can find certain elements of it complicated, especially when they have been so busy focusing on renewable energy options and they're scouring the internet for a better renewable energy option because they think, or the market tells them, that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Sure.
But I think it's them understanding that whilst they're in the middle of bridging that gap, there's something that we can be doing to support. And that's why we have as an account manager, we do spend so much time almost with the hands-on or hand-holding, if you want to call it that. But that's because we appreciate that this isn't somebody's day-to-day job where it is ours. So we'll try and support with what the data means and what we can do with the data, and kind of work really closely where it's maybe on other controls, you might be putting them on and leaving them be. This one's a much more hands-on approach.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think as well, when you compare us to things like LED lighting or solar, and even though our system is very much just one solution, the product itself, the makeup of that product, in terms of the components, is very much the same per site in some respect. But exactly like Odessa said, we go through that process of actually really, really understanding what the business's operation, what the challenges are that they're facing, the specific inefficiencies around that building that they're in. And then, yes, taking, if you want to call it, an off-the-shelf product in some respects, but specifically tailoring it round so we're not pigeonholing every single client that we're dealing with, because we know that, it can vary from dependent upon what kind of industry they're in, to what kind of operational hours they work, and even the people that are in that business as well.
So just talk to me about some of these. So you just mentioned it. So you guarantee 25% savings.
Yeah.
Which is great, isn't it? And on average, you're saving
43%.
43%. Okay, let's just consider those figures for just a couple of minutes. They're big numbers, aren't they? So, and are people finding that hard to believe in that transition? If they're looking to bring that in, is that quite challenging?
Yeah, it's such a bold statement to say.
It's great.
Because we go in and we say, oh yeah, see that annual gas bill, take a quarter of it. That's what we're going to do. And everyone thinks it's gimmicky or sales or it's just a hook. And then actually we're going to pull out some T's and C's that say only if you do X, Y, and Z and join the circus. It's not anything that it isn't. Like, it is just, we have the years of experience as EMS, we have the technology, the understanding of the business, because we spend so much time with them in the beginning doing all the fact finding, right down to what are you producing on site. So was that a lot of manual labour? Are people up and about? Do they need that temperature because they're actually having quite an active job? We spend so much time with them in the beginning, and we can really take a good understanding of what they can do to save their energy, especially when this is energy that is heating up a 100-year-old shed that's
got holes in the roof and windows falling out.
Exactly.
Like that,
and it was set years ago, and they've not edited the scheduling since then. So there's so much we can do. So it's a bold statement, but there's a reason why it's guaranteed.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you can break it down, which we can, it's not like we're sticking a title up and being like, we can save you 43%, but we're not going to explain how we do it. And I think it comes down to sort of that, almost the mathematical element of how you break down that.
We were talking about that intelligence earlier, weren't we?
Yeah. And then as soon as you start to break that down in terms of the guaranteed is there, in terms of, yes, we know by implementing this technology with these control strategies that we can save the 25%, which is the minimum. How we get you up to the more 43%, which we don't guarantee because it is more circumstantial around how that business operates, is things like door sensors and just better control and better flexible management of actually implementing changes in operational hours, programming bank holidays in, because 9 times out of 10 when we go to site, we just know it's not being done, and we can go through that verification step.
The moment you draw up in your car, okay, fine, we got this. We know what to talk to the people about.
Yeah.
Been absolutely fascinating. Odessa, Phoebe, you've been absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not just hot air. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for listening today, and we look forward to having you join us again next time. But for now, it's time to close the shutter on another great episode of the Not Just Hot Air podcast.